Yes, yes, team. Welcome to another episode of the Total Mental Performance Podcast. Today is a very, very special episode because today we have a man where, if I'm being brutally honest, TMP wouldn't be doing what it's doing without him. I think a lot of people in the industry, not even in the industry, just in life, they often forget the people that helped them. They often forget the people that opened doors. And today we have the founder of the OTE, Adam Hayley. He's a good friend. He's a client. He's actually a client before the TMP logo even existed. This has been a long time coming, this podcast. Actually, the reason why it took so long is because Adam said, "Hey, do you want to come do it at mine?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let me know when." And I was waiting for him to let me know. And then he's like, "Oh, Kieran has to invite me on the podcast." And we kind of had this long, what's going on? And I was like, "Oh, do I ask him? Does he ask me?" Yeah, here we are. Adam, mate, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. You're making me blush. And classic communication breakdown where we both second guessed each other. And here we are, though, finally.
I'm excited. We've got a lot to talk about today.
I can imagine. Yeah, should be good.
So just give a top level for anybody that's coming in. They're going, what is the OTE? Who is Adam? What does it do?
Yeah, so the OT is the online trainer of education. And we basically help PTs build their businesses online, work from their laptops, be able to travel, and just, I guess, have that freedom and avoid the burnout that can sometimes kill the passion for, coaching and training clients.
Amazing. And how does that all work?
It's a full 12-month mentorship, private one-to-one calls, private communication channel between the student and their coach, group calls, documents done for you stuff, everything that anybody could ever need to build an online business. We've got it, basically. So it's the full shebang.
Amazing. And a lot of our shared clients and a lot of your mentees will be listening to this and thinking, yeah, but Adam's so confident. Like, he's got his shit nailed. What could he possibly have to work on?
A lot. I definitely don't think confident is a word that I would have used, especially when we first met. Competent, yeah. But confident was, there's different elements of confidence, right? So confidence in what I delivered on the OT and when I would turn up on a webinar, sure, like that's my safe space, like that's me in my comfort zone, in my element, in, what I would consider as wanky is that zone of genius, and I'm on that. It's like, this is what I'm good at. But confidence is comes into lots of other areas. Like in my case, it was social, situations. It was outside of the webinars, cameras and stuff like that. I hated, as you remember, which doesn't bode well when you have to produce content for a living. So I would say professionally I was confident. Personally, I wasn't, would be the best way that I would describe it.
Yeah. And think about the moment where it clicked for you. It was quite an interesting moment because at this point I was only coaching mainly managing directors, sales directors, very much in the corporate world, just Kieran. Just, this is the stuff I enjoy. This is my network. This is my background. Let me just sort of coach here. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have ended up in Dubai.
Yeah. So how this came around, obviously you coming to Dubai, was I had an event for our inner circle groups. We have the OT, which is our sort of big group, coaches going from effectively zero. And then we have our inner circle group, which is the minimum criteria to get into it is like $7,000 per month. And then the goal is to scale them to sort of 25, 35K plus. So I'd had an event for those guys and you got to a couple of weeks before it. And Louis, obviously you're like lifelong friend, I guess.
Yeah, grew up together.
Yeah, exactly. He was part of it and he'd messaged a couple of weeks before saying, "Hey, my friend Kieran's going to be coming to Dubai with me. No worries if not, but he specializes in mental performance. Do you think that you would like him to come and speak?" And I was thinking, well, number one, I haven't filled one of the slots and I don't know what to fill it with. And number two, everybody geeks out and froths over anything, psychology, mental performance and so on. So I was like, actually, yeah, why not? And if I'm honest, I've never paid that much attention to that side of things myself. So I was like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And then, of course, I met you the night before and we were talking and I was like, oh, this guy's pretty switched on. And then I remember it that when you were on stage talking. My phone was the other side of the room on charge. And I remember like quietly getting up from my seat while you were presenting to the back of the room, picked up my phone and messaged you saying, make sure I get a session in before any of these fuckers. And then, of course, 2-3 days later, we started working together.
And, I never left.
Yeah, and then you're still here.
I'm still here 2 years later.
2 years later, yeah.
Yeah, I never left. I packed with a weekend. My plan was, all right, get in, get out. Get in, see a little bit of Dubai, do the talk, get out. And then obviously the lockdown happened. Yep. And props to you, because you threw the first live event. Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, you were one of the OGs that thought, actually, let's bring this knowledge to the market, which was cool. But then also, you're the first person to actually throw an event after lockdown. And you didn't just throw one in London, you threw one in Dubai.
It was a big risk.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a really big deal. I remember even me thinking, is it a good idea for me to go? Should I speak? Should I? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And actually, one of my mentors said, mate, just do it. Like, whenever you take those risks, shit changes for you. You've got a demonstrated track record of taking risks like that, and shit changes. So I went, okay, so I packed for a weekend, and then chatting to a few others, stay for another week. I was like, all right, I'll stay for another week. So I stayed for another week, and then the UK said, you guys are on the red list. You can't come home unless you stay in one of the COVID hotels. So I was like, all right, I'll stay in Q1. And then that's when I got the place in Marina Gate.
Yep.
It was really surreal, right? I'd gone from that period of time, I'd been traveling around Spain. Then I stayed with my parents for a couple of weeks, went out to Dubai, and then all of a sudden I lived there. I'm on the 42nd floor, looking over the entire marina, and it was just a real weird moment. So then I said, okay, I'll stay for Q1, and Q1 turned into Q2, turned into Q3, turns into this is home now. It's very organic, but it's a funny story.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how obviously you didn't have to force it. It just kind of fell into place.
Yeah, like a lot of coaches talk about coming out here, and it's a big deal. It's like, this is the date. I've got all of this sorted. Do I need this? Do I need that? For me, it wasn't like that. It was just really, really organic.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches as well have moved over here and swiftly moved back when they've realised, obviously, the cost of living and stuff is considerably higher than the UK and so on. So I think they build out to be this big thing, but don't quite do their research on it. Whereas I think for you to just kind of play it by ear as you went along has allowed you to like build this organically, no pressure. Like, because the plan wasn't to make the big move to Dubai, you just sort of bootstrapped it along the way, and it's There's
no pressure. There's no pressure. And another thing to point out as well, which you glimmed over, but that dinner that you run the night before was impressive, man. That was impressive. So for context, it was at the Armani restaurant.
Yeah, it was the Armani Hotel, which is built into the Burj Khalifa, and we had like a balcony outdoors overlooking the fountains. It was a cool, really like a treat for all of the students there that had put up with all of the lockdowns and crap and started to build these really great businesses, started to build a team and so on, and probably hadn't had a chance to sit back and reflect. So I think it was a great way to kick off the weekend, come into my apartment for drinks, then go, have that meal. It was really good. But what I will say about that event, and this will link in with the confidence thing, maybe we'll touch on it later, is I remember at that event, we were in my apartment for drinks. These are obviously all, my students that I've been working with for a long time. And I remember hiding in my kitchen behind the pillow. And for Sandy, my other half, to be like, don't you think you should go and talk to these guys? Like, they've just flown 7 hours in an aluminium tube to come and spend time with you and, learn from you. And I was like, what the fuck do I say to them? Like, what are they, why do they need to, they seem happy enough. Like, tomorrow they'll get me on stage. And then I remember being at the event, the following day, doing my presentations. And I remember on the lunch break going and getting a little plate of food and going and standing by myself off to the corner, where again, I'm a massive introvert. I'm shy. I'm quiet. I'm happy in my own space. And I often think like, what value am I going to add to this conversation? They seem relatively engaged so far. I don't want to go walk over and just stand there like that awkward eavesdropper.
Yeah.
And that was my first event. And now, of course, we've ran multiple of them where people, again, come to my apartment and I'll actually sit and talk to my own, can you believe it? So, big turnaround. And again, just an interesting one maybe for those that, from the outside, as you said, you would look at it and go, oh, it's okay for Adam, Yadi, whatever the fill in the blanks. It's like, actually, on a personal level, the confidence side of it wasn't where it should have been.
And at that point, when we started coaching together, everything was actually pretty good. The OT was in a solid spot. You started ticking off a number of goals, and everything was actually okay.
From the outside and from a revenue perspective in business. But I think I remember, saying to you in one of our first sessions that if you'd have pulled me aside at 15, 20, whatever age, and then said, right, 10 years from now, however many years, you're going to be, in a stable relationship with somebody that you get on really well with. You're going to be living in Dubai. You're going to be, running a business at the whatever revenue. As a big car fan, you're going to have these cars. You're going to have owned these. I would have thought that I would have got out of bed every day, skipping down the corridors and smiling ear to ear and uber confident. And it just wasn't like that. So business was good, but I woke up just the same as everybody else, took a shit the same as everybody else. And then it was kind of like, is this it? You achieve these things and you get there and it's kind of a bit, at least for me anyway, it was like, what's next?
Well, we spoke about it. You arrived at what we call the now what moment.
Yeah.
So we all run towards these goals that we have to tick off. It's like, okay, well, once I have this thing, or in business, we're here, or here, or here, or here, or here. And then once you tick all of those off, and I see this again, not even just with coaches, but in business leaders, entrepreneurs that have sold their businesses, and they reach what I call a now what moment, which is, because it's really easy to be driven when you're skint.
Yeah.
It's really easy to be driven when you're insecure. It's really easy to be driven then. But when you have ticked off all the things that you thought would bring you validation, and then it's like, well, I have it now. You almost enter this gray zone. And then there's two ways you can go with the gray zone. You fall back into scarcity, not enough, and go, well, I'll have to double it then, and you chase that one. Or you can operate out of abundance and growth and fun, which is, how can I live this lifestyle? How can we begin to move forward?
Yeah, I would agree. There's a couple of things that I would add. I would say number one, cliche, is same, very similar to relationships. They say like the chase sometimes is the most exciting part. For me, it was definitely the same in business. That hustle to get to that first million or whatever, that hustle to get that first, whatever the materialistic item is. It really is, that is really important, or probably the most fun part. And the second bit is like the law of diminishing returns. That again, I'll just link it back to like materialistic items or whatever. Every materialistic item that you buy, the dopamine hit gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you don't get that same.
Yeah.
Like again, I'll link it back because obviously cars are like, a huge passion of mine. My goal was, ever since I was a kid, from James Bond films, my lifelong goal was to have an Aston Martin, and I remember verbalizing it to one of my exes when I was either 17 or 19. And I said, one day, I'll have an Aston Martin. And she sort of, bless you. Like, that's for other people. Like, we don't live that lifestyle. You're cleaning treadmills for 14.5 grand a year. And then, of course, eventually 10 years later or whatever made it happen. And the dopamine and like sense of pride and excitement at that car collection was just never beaten afterwards. No matter how many cars later, it's like it just becomes less and less and less, to the point like, one of my cars, I didn't even go and do a collection. It was just like, oh yeah, can you just trailer it to my place? And I just like, there wasn't even this big song and dance. Whereas with that first car, it was like
big deal.
Yeah, my one of my really good friends, Eunice, came with me. One of my clients that was in the car trade, a guy called Rob, came with me to that first collection. It was all under, the black cover, and it was this huge deal, And then after that, every it sounds so, like first world problems, but it's just true. It may be valuable for somebody listening to this, that it's like, whenever you do tick off a big goal, like sit in that moment.
Stop and smell the roses.
Yeah. And another thing that's really easy to do, of course, is to like, you want to get photos or videos of it or show it on socials or send it to friends. And it's like, you end up living it through that lens. So for anybody that is working towards a big goal, again, could be holiday, materialistic, like an experience, whatever it is, sit with it, especially that first time, because you never get that feeling back.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's a great story with Ricky Gervais and Steve Merchant when they were at The Office, right? Obviously, Ricky Gervais, working class guy. He's been brought up in a council estate in Reading. Steve Merchant's always been a middle class sort of guy, but anyway, he's not lived this sort of life. I can't remember the award show. I want to say the BAFTAs. Might be something else, not sure. Anyway, they've flown to the States, and they've never ever done that before. So they get to the States, and they get picked up in this limo. And in this limo, there's like lights in the ceiling, there's champagne, there's like all of this, whatever. They didn't even think they were going to win. They just turned up because they're like, fuck it. I'm like, let's go. So then they get there, and then they go to the awards show, and they win. And they're there for like 4 or 5 nights. And guess what? They're getting all of these limos, like to all these different places, these dinners that they've been invited to. And then when they're going back to the airport, the limo, the last one, was a little bit old. It didn't have the lights in the roof and didn't have any champagne in it. Ricky goes, this is a bit shit, isn't it? And it was at that point he reflected and he went, hang on, I'm a council house kid from Reading. How within the space of 4 or 5 days did I go from being like, wow, this is amazing, to this one's a little bit shit? And human beings' expectations change so quick, and you become acclimatized to a certain way of being or living really, really fast. Steve Jobs said this at the end of his autobiography. It hit me so hard. It's at the end of it. He said, the reward is the journey. And that might sound really cliche and lame and simple, but I'd read his entire autobiography, get right to the end where he's like, he's about to die, and he's speaking to one of his original first HR managers, and that's what he said to her. He said, the reward is the journey. And when you really think about that, a lot of people, particularly when they're starting out, they're for year 1, 2, 3 of business, all they're looking at is the stuff. Yeah, but when I have this many clients, or when I have this material thing, or this holiday, or I live in a place like this, or I get to travel the world, they're so focused on the end results, they're not actually just enjoying where they're at. And sometimes, just like you said, sitting in where you're at is an incredibly powerful thing.
Yeah. The funny thing is, we can say this until we're blue in the face, but somebody watching this, listening to this, who is at that £1,000, £2,000, £3,000, they'll just be thinking, yeah, all right.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. Because you read it, you see it, you hear it. I was the same, where it's just like, fuck off. It's gonna be great when they're lying. Like, no, it's quite a disappointment.
Yeah. So, and another thing that I think clients have to do is they have to kind of make their own mistakes, and that's the power of having mentors.
Yeah.
And sometimes you listen to a mentor and you go, I kind of want to make the mistake. I know this is a mistake. I kind of want to make that mistake. And you go and make it, and then you go, okay, my mentor was right. Sometimes you listen, you go, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm going to avoid that. Maybe I won't do that. So if you want to really enjoy the journey, focus on the process. Like what I sometimes call is a gritty rebuild period. Some people might be listening and their back's against the wall. They're experiencing financial pressure. Maybe they've been through a breakup or a divorce. Maybe there's all sorts of stuff happening in their personal life. There's a beauty in the gritty rebuild period. There's an absolute beauty in it. I remember when I was living on my auntie's sofa in a 1-bedroom council flat on an estate in South London, and it was so small. It was my auntie, my uncle, and me. My auntie would be asleep in the bedroom. The office was in the living room where I was sleeping. My uncle would be working in the middle through the night. He was a journalist, typing away, and I'm sleeping on the sofa, like an old IKEA sofa, right? And it's cold in there, and it's damp in there, and there's mold in there, and it's like we're in there. And I remember lying there, and I remember having the covers. And even though it was like -2, I remember thinking, I've got somewhere warm to sleep. I know this is hard, and I was getting into the office for 8 a.m., cold calling into Europe, and then cold calling into the States until about 5, 6 o'clock at night. That was from South London to Central London, then from Central London to Dale Youth Boxing Club, where I'd be boxing 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. Then it'd take me an hour to get back down to South London. I was doing those days and I was freezing cold, but I remember thinking, this is really fucking hard. But I remember experiencing gratitude. I've got somewhere to sleep, and it's freezing outside, and there's lots of homeless people here, and they don't have that. And I've got a dream, and that might sound really lame, but it's like at that moment of time, it's like I've got a dream, and I know things can be different. I don't know how I'm gonna get there yet, but I just know it. So if you're in that moment of struggle, just understand there's even a beauty in the struggle. And when Steve Jobs had said that to his HR manager, that the journey is the reward, I think I've been quite lucky to understand that and go, yeah, you know what? Like even in the hard moments when you get kicked in the nuts and you're down on the floor and then you got other people kicking you while you're down, there's even a beauty within that. And that's what's forging the identity, the character, the stories for you to go and add value to other people.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And, you know, if you look at a lot of successful, you know, if you talk financially and so on, you know, business owners and stuff, they usually have some form of a backstory. It's usually not been super, you know, plain sailing. There has been that curveball here and there, maybe not that severe, but they've had to overcome it. It gives you that grit. And I just think that, like, the lessons that you learn massively help you out later on in business.
Without a doubt. So let's get to that point right at the beginning of the coaching. What was coming up for you when you realized, let's dive in?
Coaching, let's dive in terms of with.
So we're at the event. You've seen the it was the first ever one, managing emotional meltdowns, and I still got it saved without all the TMP branding. I've still got the original. It was done on the Apple slideshow thing. I've still got it. I kept it. You sat there. You're seeing all of that. We've had a couple of sessions, and what do you realize was coming up for you that you thought, yeah, let's turn the needle on this?
So I can't remember what the trigger was, if I'm honest. So I know that I was talking to Sandy. So there's a couple of things coming up. Number one was confidence. I've always had social anxiety and so on, which is ironic. So I used to DJ, you know, when I was younger, and would DJ in a club of like 2,000 people, and I'd be fine because I was in my little booth.
Yeah.
Right. And then, you know, whenever I was doing events, when I'm on stage, I was fine. But then if you put me at a table of like 8 people, or you got me to walk into a room where everybody's already socializing, I would just shit myself. So that was one of the things. Second thing was the camera, you know, confidence, that having my photo taken, video work outside of webinars, you know, if it was just like content, you know, I just hated it. And then the third thing was just general fulfillment, that I remember saying to Sandy, probably maybe a month or so before you came to Dubai, we were next to the pool, and I remember saying to her something along the lines of like, hey, don't freak out, but I think I need some help. And she's like, what? And I was like, you know, and I explained that thing of we have a really great lifestyle and X, Y, Z, and if you told me this, and I thought I would feel a certain way and I don't. And I said, like, I'm sure that other, you know, business owners or whatever go through this, you know, and I don't know anybody that can guide me and tell me, you know, yeah, it's normal, like, you know, get on with it, or actually you're missing out on X, Y, Z. So I said to her, you know, I'm going to try and find somebody, you know, could help me with this, that, you know, I don't know what I'm looking for exactly, but there's got to be some guidance. And then, yeah, you came and did the talk, and I think there was one of the exercises was there was a list of maybe emotions or something like that. And you had to like identify certain of them, and there was an whatever it was, obviously it stood out, and I was like, oh fuck, tick, 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 you know. And then, yeah, that was the catalyst to thinking, stars have aligned, you know. There's me saying to Sandy like less than a month ago, I think I need some help, you know, with some bits. And then there's you know, standing on stage, and then that particular exercise, I was just sort of nodding along, going like, "Oh fuck, you know, I'm resonating with this."
It makes sense.
Yeah.
My favorite phrase, not my favorite phrase, I say that's about 100 phrases, but one of my favorite phrases is when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And if you think about mentors that came into your life, sometimes it's like, oh my God, wow. Some of you listening to this will be going, well, I'm in the market for a business mentor, or I really want to get off the gym floor and I really want to take a crack at online. I don't know. And you're going to listen to this and you're going to go, oh my God, Adam Hayley's the man. Don't sit on that. Don't procrastinate on that. Some of the people that are most successful, I know, they took risks. They just went, fuck it, go on then. They'll go all in. On the flip side, some of you might be listening to this and going, yeah, Kieran, this is resonating. I do need to go and achieve total mental performance. I need to go and work on this. Again, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and you jump straight in. And yeah, look back at that. It's cool.
Yeah, I had a few situations similar to that. I remember my first ever PT client was a guy called Andy Marshall, who was like I'd have been 16 or 17 at the time. I'd literally got qualified at 16. And this guy was, I want to say he was chief operating officer, like COO of operations outside of Europe for Costa Coffee, like huge. And this stuff that I learned from, and it was a risk. He was my first client, and I probably should have passed him to somebody else that was more experienced. But it was like this, like, when do you get an opportunity like this, especially from somebody like myself coming from Crawley? Didn't do well at school, no formal education or anything. And speaking to him, like the lessons and stuff that I learned, I remember him, running me through just very openly his wages and what he was earning. And that was just like, oh my God, like somebody else, from this town is earning this sort of money. Oh my God, is that real? So that was the first sort of mentor that got me to, open. And I worked with him for about 4 or 5 years. I'd end up going to his, Boxing Day and stuff like that. I'd be invited around and got on really well. Then, and I know we'll obviously come to it later, then he was the one that really pushed me to take the role in London that I went for. And he actually took me, like, I'd never worn a suit ever in my life. Maybe like when I was really young at a wedding or something. But other than that, I'd never tied a tie, I'd never worn a suit because I just didn't need it at any of my schools or anything. So he actually took me suit shopping for my interview there and helped prep me for it. So that was that first mentor. Then Akash and I, when we were running R&T, we'd done okay, and then we'd sort of hit a plateau. We heard of somebody who was ahead of us, so we invested into a mentorship, and we basically emptied our entire business account on it. And it was a huge, like, we've worked to get our first, 10, 11,000 pounds, and we're about to wipe like 10,000 of it. It was like 95% of our bank balance on this. And then right after doing that and paying for it, the mentorship's like, oh, and by the way, we've got our first event in Toronto in 2 weeks. So we're like, fuck, how are we going to afford the flights and hotels and so on? So anyways, so then we built that. And then afterwards, when we'd split a couple of years later, and then I was obviously growing the OTE, it was like, shit, I've just left that. Now I need to build this thing. And then that's when I started training with my friend and then training partner Eunice, who just, he's running like a 7-figure business. I don't want to go through exact numbers, but doing very well for himself. And again, it was that encouragement. And I remember him just saying to me, like, do you back yourself in the gym? I was like, yeah, like, you got this. Yeah. So yeah, they do just fall into place at the right times. You just got to grab each opportunity, both hands.
And that's the key word. It kind of, as you said it actually dropped a heavy emotion within me. I don't know, I can't even describe the emotion, but encouragement. Like, when I think about encouragement, I think about my first ever boxing coach, the one that passed away, Louis' uncle. And that's what he did. He encouraged you. And when the student is ready, you'll have opportunities for people to encourage you. And it's down to you as to whether you answer that call or not. And that might be scary and that might be risky. But there are people out there that want to help you. There are people out there with connections on knowledge. And like you said, with your first ever, one of your first PT clients, he opened doors in your mind that you didn't even know were possible.
100%. Yep.
And you need people around you, because we can't see our own glass ceilings. We cannot see our potential. And having those people that will open that door for you to go, oh shit, there's another level of living. There's another way of doing this. There's another level of being. That is so exciting. And that's why we talk about boardroom selection so much at TMP. It's so underrated.
Yeah, I would agree. But the person really needs to be open-minded, because it's really easy to go, oh, it's okay for them. It's okay, We have people join us, within the OTE, and then they'll either give up and pull out within the first 30 days or whatever. And I'm like, you've seen so many of our successes, testimonials from people of all different backgrounds. Think of Sam Jordan that we referenced earlier. She started with us. She'd never actually been a trainer. She qualified, but she never actually trained anybody because she was in a corporate job. Kids. She had less than 70 Instagram followers. And now she's doing like 6, 7, 8 grand a month. So we have like a huge portfolio of this, and then we'll get students join that have a big following, have content, have this, have already got results and so on and so forth. And they'll do 3 weeks and it's like, I can't do this. It just blows my mind that it's like, you're not trying to do something that nobody has ever done before.
Yeah.
You're not trying to send humans to Mars, like Mr. Musk is. It's like you've seen loads of people ahead of you hit that 3K, 5K, 7K. You just have to be open-minded and go, yeah, fuck it. Why can't I? Same with that Aston Martin thing, by the way, where I was, my ex had a point, at the time I was cleaning treadmills for like 14 grand a year. It was like 850 quid a month or something like that. And I remember saying to her, like, why can't I? Somebody's got to drive it. If I work hard enough, why can't it be me? And she's just like, oh, bless you. Like,
I had something similar when I was 17. It is a funny story. First ever sales job, 17. I've just graduated Peter Jones Enterprise Academy. I'm the youngest student there. And I get this job at this welding manufacturing company. But they just brought out this new VR software. So you'd put you'd see all of the software on the screen. If you wanted to put goggles on, you could put goggles on. And you had this welding torch. And essentially the premise was, if we could help you teach people how to weld without blowing themselves up and saving lots in time and material and actually engage a younger audience who don't really want to go into that industry, would that be helpful? It's like, well, yeah, of course. So they brought me in to sell this thing. We hadn't really sold many, and they were 16.5 grand each, which at the time was a lot of money, a lot of money. And they got me to do all these cold calls. And they got a spreadsheet, and they said, we want to call these people every single day. For the first 2 weeks I did over 1,200 calls. No one was interested. Then the CEO calls me up to the room. He goes, you still here? I went, yeah, I'm still here. And he goes, well, that was a test. I went, what do you mean? He's like, we give you shit numbers, we give you shit, all of this for a reason. We wanted to see whether you'd stick it or not. We're going to give you the real list next week. He's like, fucking thanks. But I remember that first 2 weeks, I was sat in the reception, and the marketing manager there at the time, this woman, she was like, yeah, I see you're working hard, but like, whoa, what do you want to be? And at the time, when you're 17, I want to be a millionaire. With that naivety, I was like, I want to be a millionaire. And she goes, really? I was like, yeah. She goes, do you know how unrealistic that is? I went, what do you mean? She was like, what, you think it's just easy to become a millionaire? Most people don't. Most people try and they fail and they don't make it. And that lack of encouragement, sometimes the world will try and push you back into your box, because that's how they see the world. And people will put their limitations as to what they believe is possible, and they'll push that on you. When you try something new, people will take the piss. People will try and push you back. They'll probably say, you can't do this, you can't do that, it's not possible. And when you've already got your own internal dialogue of, I'm not sure if I can do it, and then somebody's like, no, you definitely can't do it, it's not cool.
Yeah, I had it when when I decided to leave the PT in London, which was a full-time client base, around 60 grand a year, which as a PT is pretty reasonable, like 5 grand a month as an average. I remember my parents thinking I was nuts when I told them that I was going to go and do this online thing. I worked from my laptop, and they're just like, what? Even my accountant at the time, a guy called Jeff, he was just like, are you sure you want to do this? It was just, it's a big risk. This online thing's not proven. And, it's just that gut instinct of like, I got this.
You've got to do it.
It's where it's going. It's going to give me fulfillment. And then, here we are, like however many years later.
And you'll always get to the line where you could just not do it. And you're like, oh. I had a similar moment when I left that job. But I think I just about turned 19. I sold over $500,000 worth of software. So I've got some commission in the bank. And no one in my family sort of seen that level of earnings that quickly. They're like, Kieran's, he's made it. He's done it. And I said, yeah, I'm going to quit this to go and box full time. What? Yeah, I want to box at the Olympics. That's the dream. You're nuts. Everybody at work, when I said that's what I want to go and do, you're nuts. The whole world was say to you, no. I went and did it anyway, and I didn't achieve my Olympic dream. I managed to go from a relatively nobody to 6th in the UK ranked, and managed to make the England team. And the experiences and the learnings and just fucking how hard it is being an athlete gave me foundations of which unlocked doors for today, working with mindset coaches that have won world champions, European and British titles. They've coached them the best of the best. I would never have met those mentors if I hadn't have taken those risks. The world will tell you, don't do it. The world will say, play it safe, play it small, stay in the box. But actually, sometimes, and even when you're looking at it and you could just not do it, just think, well, what are the consequences of not doing it? What are the consequences of me just playing it safe? And we'll be really surprised as to how life can just turn in lots of different directions when you stop playing by the Matrix's rules, when you stop playing by this is the path. There's so many other paths.
Yeah, everybody, keep your head down, clock in, clock out, collect your paycheck. But I just think what's the worst that can happen?
You go back to work.
Yeah.
You go get another job.
It's but what if it does pay off? And you just weigh it up. To me, it's just painfully obvious. You got one shot on this dust ball, right, that we're on. So it's fuck it. As you say, you just go back, you find another job or whatever. You'll figure it out, rather than take that easy route and then, continue looking at others that are doing what you would like. And again, telling yourself all of these reasons as to why they're in that position and you're not, and fucking boo-hoo. Yeah.
And that, a lot of it comes down to your upbringing. And I do believe children get messages of you're enough or you're not enough, and then they internalize it. You'll do it, you won't ever do it. Me and Louis are great examples. If we think about Louis, and he's building the Power Project, which is a men's empowerment peak performance program. So we were both, at some point as kids, and it's funny because we've got really similar, we grew up together, right? We both got told we weren't enough by the world. And we went completely different ways. I went, fuck you, I'm going to prove you wrong, overachiever, I've got to be the best in everything I do. Urgh. Louis went, you're right. Yeah, I guess not. And he completely underestimated himself and his abilities and his character. And I think kids make those two pathways. They either go, fuck you, prove you wrong, or no, you're right, I'm not enough. But regardless, you can still wing them back round. And Louis is a testament to now, where he felt like he didn't have power. His job is to empower men that don't believe in themselves, that want to break out of it, but they just can't, And when you make those decisions, that's where you can really start to go, okay, well, maybe that's why I'm not taking this risk. I don't believe in myself. Maybe your upbringing, for whatever reason, because we've all got stories. We've all got reasons as to why we shouldn't do it or why we shouldn't win. But you have to rewrite the stories sometimes. Sometimes you got to go get a pencil and a rubber, and you go back to those old stories and you go, that's not who I am anymore. And a lot of the work we do at TMP is helping you go back to those stories and unravel that. I'd love to dive into some of your stories. What was it like growing up for Adam Hayley?
Elements of it, not bad. There's no dumpster living, eating out of dump, roof over my head. Financially just getting by, I guess. No luxury or anything like that, but also, not on the poverty line. So that was fine. School, I was, pretty quiet, very low attention span. So it's funny, I picked up my school reports a few months back when I was back in the UK.
No way.
And it was quite interesting. And it was just going through it, and it was just all Adam has potential, but he gets distracted. Adam just, disrupts the class. Adam just this. That was just my story in a nutshell, was just the conventional schooling system of sitting down, listening, memorizing it and regurgitating on a test just is not how I learn. So yes, that wasn't great. Did come from an abusive background with dad and then stepdad. All fine now, but back then there was that, which again probably added to the whole, fuck you. I'm going to do this, stand on my own 2 feet and whatnot. So yes, that was that.
Just on that.
Yeah.
How did that play into the introverted side? How did that play in, if you reflect on that now, how did that play into not wanting to be in front of camera, not wanting to put yourself out there, that social anxiety side of things? How did that, if you was going to connect the dots?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the physical side of things. I don't even think it's really come up in our sessions. I hope this doesn't turn into one. So that side of it, I don't know. The introverted side of it, I remember we did the timeline therapy. And one of the things that came up was I'd said that obviously I have the social anxiety and I can be there at a meal with 5, 8, 10, 12 people. And I'll happily just sit there and I'm fine. And I mean it. I will just sit and nod my head and smile. And then it never really clicked until I did a road trip a couple of years ago through like south of France, Italy and stuff, with Eunice and a bunch of kind of the guys that he's met along the way, like in the car world. And it was an amazing trip. And then one of the nights we have this meal and I'm just sort of sat listening and looking around. And then afterwards, Eunice said to me, you okay, mate? And I'm like, yeah, why? He goes, you literally didn't say anything for like 3 hours. I'm like, oh, I didn't really think there was anything. The conversation seemed covered.
Yeah.
Why am I going to talk for the sake of it? And then it wasn't until we did our timeline therapy that it turns out that my stepdad, when I was younger, would always, if we were in restaurants and stuff like that, and even, when my parents had friends over sometimes, there were these phrases that he would use, which was, children should be seen and not heard, and you'll speak when spoken to. And the thing that you had pointed out after this timeline therapy, and it sounds fucking nuts for anybody that hasn't gone through any of this, but it's like, that imprinted on you. You took it literally.
Yeah.
So then when I was at group events, it's like, you should be seen and not heard, and you'll speak when spoken to. So it's like, I'm waiting for somebody to go, Adam, what do you think about this? And it's like, well, I'm glad you asked. I think that probably played into the, the shyness, the introverted thing. And something else that I'll just quickly say, it's a bit of a side note, is with the whole, quiet, reserved, shy, introvert, whatever terminology we want to give it, I think that can often be mistaken for arrogance. And I've had it, Chinese whispers that's eventually got back to me where because of it, I come across like I feel I'm too good to speak to people.
It's so interesting.
And it's actually the other way around, where it's actually you don't feel that you're going to add value to the conversation. So it's like, it's easier just to give a quick nod or a quick wave and then carry on, versus like, why would this person, want to spend the next 15 minutes talking? But it's actually been fed, quite a few times, that it's like, oh, that Adam guy comes across like he's kind of up himself and he doesn't want to stop. But it's actually like the polar opposite.
And often with most people, that is the case.
Yeah.
It is you'll often see, it's like the opposite, when you see those, air quotes, ultra confident, ultra masculine guys where they're up, they're out, they're shouting, they're like, and this is the way, and this is this, and this is this. That's the defense mechanism for not feeling safe. And they have to it's almost like, the loud barking dog. The loud barking dog actually on the inside, they're scared, they're insecure. And often you'll build up these pictures of people of they're stuck up, they're arrogant, they're angry, they're sad, they're whatever. But you don't actually understand what's going on the internal layer. And all of those lines of code are written when we're kids. And one of those lines of code was, you'll speak when spoken to. And kids think in black or white. They literally take feedback and they go, well, that's just how I am. That's just how it is. So then that's the line of code. So whenever the stimulus comes in of social situations, sat around the dinner table, what's the line of code? Speak when spoken to. All right. And that is the basis of how we experience reality. And if you think how many different lines of code there are in so many different areas, whether that's business, whether it's personal life, whether that's performance, anything. So when you can identify, and you won't be able to do it on your own, you need somebody to hold up a mirror to those little blind spots and go, well, is that helpful? And you go, oh, no. I remember in one session saying to you, the fact that you have been able to build this kind of business, being an introvert, is phenomenal. The fact that you've been able to build this without getting out and about and speaking and networking, and you've just done it through hard work. You've done it through using your protection mechanisms, but then also leveraging that to your advantage and still pushing yourself through. It was mind-blowing after that session. That was when I realized, wow, like you can find a way, regardless of your internal beliefs or stories, if you want it enough. And a lot of people don't want it enough, and they say they do, and there's always that disconnect.
100%, yeah. I think you just have to accept/work on the perceived weaknesses, and then also just do a deep dive into what strengths do I have? What am I good at? So for me, it's like one-on-one communication. I am good at listening, and then getting into somebody's head, which as a coach, whether that's, a PT, an online coach, business mentoring, that's what gets you those results. So I would play to that, to my advantage. It wasn't the fancy macros or whatever, or training split that I would give to my physique clients. It was being able to get into their head and understand them. And then I did that, again with business, and that's what put the results on the map. And then the other strength, one of the strengths of an introvert is focus. So when I am passionate about a certain project and want to tinker and play, I can just sit at the laptop for hours and just get it built. So it was just leveraging like what are the strengths that I've got, and then attracting people similar to me, because, you know, we've mentioned that I'm not a huge network, or I don't network. I'm not an extrovert. I don't get energy from that. So of the small amount of people that I do attract into my world, they seem to be of a similar mindset and so on. So it's building this little team of, you know, similar minded people that are on the same wavelength, and magic happens when you can start doing that.
And when you be authentic and you're just putting out your frequency, you will attract people that want to come into your world.
Yeah, that's another one. Is, you know, one of the things that I tell my students is that I'm not the funniest guy in the room. I'm not crazy, controversial over socials. I don't have to F and blind or call people out. It's just not my nature. And it can be easy on social media to feel that you do have to do these things in order to get views, get clicks, get spoken about, and so on. And it probably can help. But then if that's not truly you, you'll attract like-minded people, and then they just rub you up the wrong way. Whereas one of the things that consistently gets said about the OTE community at the events, within our group, on the live calls, is like, what a cool group of guys and girls that you've attracted. And I think it is just where it's like, I've just owned my quirks, my shortfalls, and so on. And it's worked so far.
You've done it your way. And this is where coaches build coaching businesses they resent, is because they haven't been truly authentic to how they want to live. They haven't been truly authentic with the sort of money that they actually want to make. They haven't been truly authentic with the type of client they want to coach, and being truly authentic with what drives them. So what stops us from being authentic? Usually trauma, usually things that happen to us when we were younger, usually an experience where you've been told that is not enough or that is not okay. So then you're not authentic. Whereas when you can be who you are, the clients you'll attract and the business coaching business you can build can have so much meaning and so much purpose. But the coaches that build coaching businesses that they resent is they haven't been authentic. And in fact, at some point during the journey, somebody taught them to think like that. Somebody taught them to think that they cannot be who they are. And the more that you are who you are, the more you'll attract like-minded individuals. And you can come into work and think, I don't have to work with a cunt today, because that can happen. You've probably worked in organizations, I've worked in organizations where you just think, our values are just not aligned. Like for me, transparency, just being upfront, honest, put my cards on the table. This is where I am. This is me being upfront. And you go work somewhere and it's like, you would stab me in the back for a tenner. You would take whatever it is you to trample on just to get there. And when you actually understand that, the more you're authentic, the more it gets really obvious. And it gets really obvious really quickly. This guy or girl isn't for me. This person isn't for me. This whatever environment you're in. But it is diving deep and unlocking levels of authenticity is really where true, powerful confidence comes from. Not resenting parts of you, owning those parts of you. I'm an introvert.
Yep.
I'm not that fussed about going to shake everyone's hand in a room and being the center of attention. I'm quite happy to just do my thing and see what comes up. And you own that. When you can start to own that, that's where I feel like doors really start to shift.
Yeah, I would agree. Yep. Yeah, nothing more to say on that one other than just, embrace it. And this isn't just like for somebody watching this that gets, power and energy from social interactions and extrovert, like own those tendencies. But then for those of you watching that are quieter, maybe this gives you that. And it might take you slightly longer to build a business. You might not get as many likes and stuff, or your account might not grow as quickly as somebody that forces or puts on this persona. But long term, you'll build that business that you enjoy with the right people in it, where you don't feel like you're working half the time, because you get to interact with people that are on the same bandwidth as you.
Yeah, it's not, a flash pan business, like done. 12 months in, it rise, it hit its peak, it falls, it crashed, it burned, and then you don't want to do it and you go do something else. That really, staying in the game is really important. And one of the best performance tools is getting clear on your values, getting clear on who you are and what's important, and then doing that over the long term. The camera confidence, if you're going to look back at childhood and go, maybe here's a couple of moments, or here's a few things that I realized actually being in front of camera made me feel uncomfortable. What do you think you could look that to?
Yeah, so again, we did the timeline therapy. I can pinpoint it that when I was in the playground at like 11, 12 years old, some kid called me chinky because of my eyes. And that was the start of whatever, hang up that I had, that whenever a photo would be taken, the first thing I would do would be like zoom in on my eyes, any video work. So then of course, by default, I remember, working with photographers and stuff, and I would just not look at the camera, which is difficult. So yeah. And then we did the work on that, and now I have zero issues.
And that was a line of code that was imprinted, right? That was like, oh, I gotta hide, I've gotta not be me, I've gotta do this, I've gotta do that. And think about how your content changed, think about how your marketing changed, think about how your being changed, and then how that floods into your business, into your coaching, into your delivery.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny, like, I used to, hate having my photo taken. Whereas now I'm definitely not one of these people that loves it, but it's just not an issue anymore. If I need to produce content, if Sandy says, oh, we're on holiday, let's get a photo taken together. I used to think, fuck, here we go. And now it's like, okay, cool. Very indifferent to it now. Yeah.
And think about the amount of bandwidth that saves.
For sure. Especially, when you're marketing online and visual content is kind of important. It's easy now just to, if you need to pick up a camera and shoot, you can just do it without any issues.
And that's where, when we talk about mental performance and achieving total mental performance, this isn't, you can't get out of bed and this is going to be the end of the world. This is, what are the 1 to 2 to 3% tweaks that we can make where we can free up bandwidth, and you can go and use that bandwidth to go and use it towards abundance and growth. And we all have these various different areas of bandwidth that's going to hold us back. Case in point for me, literally this is as fresh as this week I've learned this in relation to personal relationships. I've always found personal relationships difficult with a woman. I've always found that really hard, and I always felt trapped. And whenever a woman was in the picture, it always burnt up bandwidth. It was always like, so guess what? If I'm a very driven, focused guy, well, I'll just push that aside. Even though relationships are good for you, they can actually unlock a new level of life. And when I went back to it, I was like, why does that take up so much bandwidth? Actually, as a kid, I felt trapped. So I had a very anxious mother. My mum was amazing. She did so much love and respect. But she lost her mum when she was a child, and that impacted her a lot. She's very anxious. So then you've got an ADHD kid that's bouncing off the walls. That's like, you can't contain. And then you've got an anxious mother. Well, guess what? You get smothered. And then all of my primary school teachers, it's literally come out this on Monday. It was amazing. All my primary teachers, they're all female. If you think about primary school teachers, typically 80%, I think is the statistic in the UK, maybe even higher now, are female. Guess what? Sit still. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. But guess what? I feel trapped. So I associated women and having a woman near me, trapping me and holding back my freedom. Now you could say, yeah, but what's that got to do with business? What's that got to do with total mental performance? All of that bandwidth, whenever I've been dating or trying to see someone, all of a sudden there's bandwidth there. I'm starting to feel trapped. How can you be an abundant, open thinker if in the back of your mind, you're a bit worried about becoming trapped? And it's these 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5% tweaks where we unlock bandwidth, which unlocks new levels of energy, new levels of thinking, and ultimately unlocks another level of performance, which you just can't get going to therapy. You just can't get like getting a fitness coach. It's a very, very specialist thing, and that detail is something that we focus on so much to the point where you go, the idea is you go, boom, oh my God, the detail on that, I can't believe that. And that's what enables so much change so much faster, because we're looking at those tiny 1 to 2%.
Yep, I would agree. Yeah, the things that we worked on, as you said, it wasn't, I can't get up in the morning. Mm-hmm. It was none of that. And I can, for those go through that, not great, but it was those small little I know I can do better with this. You're running your own event and hiding behind the kitchen pillar, not great. Cringing or like over obsessing over how you look in a photo, not ideal. So it was these 2% tweaks that, just end up, just propelling the business forwards through that, freer bandwidth, I guess, as you mentioned.
So let's follow the timeline. Childhood, there's been a bit of abuse, mental and perhaps physical altercations or whatever. Then from there, there's been a bit of bullying at school. And these things have imprinted a line of code, which is speak when spoken to and be careful of how you look, because you might get picked on for it. You work through those. Mm-hmm. Now run us through into teenage Adam. What was it like being a teenager for you?
Nothing really stands out, which I don't know if that's good or bad. Just average. Dated, was in some good relationships. Obviously, eventually ended, but nothing to write home about. I think the reason why the teenage years don't stand out so much would be because I left school as soon as I could and got qualified at 16 and then started working. So really my late teen years were actually, they were spent I want to make something of myself. So I was working, and I was actually working 2 roles. So I mentioned earlier DJing. So I was DJing sort of 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. And then I was also a gym instructor and personal trainer on top, because we had to do 40 hours, gym instructor plus personal training outside of it. So it wasn't conducive, and I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And it was sometimes, I remember, DJing at Tiger East Croydon until 3, 4 in the morning. And then I have to get a train back into Crawley, and then being on the early shift in the gym at 6, and somehow would push through. So yeah, those sort of 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old years were just a bit of a blur from genuinely just working. I had fun, but it was genuinely just sort of grafting away, knowing that I would be planting those seeds, for later on, which, it all kind of ended up working out in the end.
And let's build this, because one thing that you've got that's very unique about you is when it actually comes to fitness coaching, you have done every level possible, right? Think about it. You started cleaning treadmills, qualified, then started personal training. Then, as you'll go into in a moment, went into London, worked your way up in that environment. Then made the switch to online before anyone else had made that switch. And it was very, very, very new. And then you built a successful business there, and then you started mentoring that and teaching others how to do that. You have literally started from, I don't like the phrase.
I actually started as a lifeguard.
Right, is it
Yeah, I became a lifeguard in order to get my foot in the door of the gym. Yeah, so...
you cease to amaze me.
Yeah, so no gym would take me. So I was interviewing for gyms, and they were like, oh, this sounds great, but you have no experience. And it was like, well, how do I get experience if no fucker will give me experience? So eventually I agreed to just be a lifeguard. I don't know how you can be bad at lifeguarding, but I was basically sacked for ordering pizza to the side of the pool one evening. But before it got to that stage, I'd managed to negotiate after a while of doing 20 hours poolside and then 20 hours on the gym floor. So I finally on my CV could write, gym floor instructor. Thank God. And then, from there, worked at a gym in Crawley. It was under a hotel called the Aurora Hotel. I remember my first shift there. It was a 6 a.m. start. It was a small hotel gym, 700 members, 800 members. And I remember turning up at 10 to 6, freezing cold. And I get there and there's all these members stood outside the door waiting to be let in. And then I sort of walk over, and then we're waiting and waiting. People are getting restless. And then I start getting a call from the guy that had hired me, Dave. And he goes, hey mate, I'm going to be honest. I went out drinking last night. So here's how you're going to open up the gym. He goes, you're going to go to the hotel reception. They're going to give you the key, and the light switches are here. And that first shift was me just sort of
wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting. So I worked there for a bit, and then I moved to another gym that was then, I think, a 2,000 member gym, K2 in Crawley. I think it was probably one of the biggest gym floors in Crawley. And both of these gyms, I was now at this point PTing, but still doing the classic cleaning and this sort of stuff. But the one thing that I don't know how I fell into it, but I just had this obsession. I think I just got this light bulb moment once where I saw one of the busiest PTs, a guy called Paul, and he would have so many clients. He was doing quite well financially for the area that we're in, but his clients looked the fucking same month after month after month after month after month. And I was just like, how does this guy?
And when you say the same,
as in he was training clients for fat loss and body composition, and they just would not
change.
He was I just classed him as he'd become a renter friend.
Wow.
When I watched him, it was just
interesting.
He was just laughing the entire
I thought you were
session.
going to say the opposite, which was and they're all shredded. They're all walking around in incredible. And then I made the connection. I was like, oh, you got to get results.
No, it was the opposite way.
Wow.
No, where I was looking at him and I was like, you're a bit of a fucking charlatan. You know, you're charging people this amount of money, session after session after session, and they haven't changed. So I wanted to really go the opposite way. So basically become in that gym, like, I hate sounding arrogant, but the best results producing, you know, PT, where it was, if you wanted a result, like Adam was the guy to go to. Which worked out well because Paul was an extrovert, good at networking, gift of the gab, very friendly, approachable, would just go and talk to people on the gym floor. As you can imagine, that was not my style.
Yeah.
I was that classic hide behind the gym desk and hope that somebody would approach me. Luckily, because I'd focused so much on the results, word of mouth spread about, and I was fortunate enough to be able to capitalize on people, you know, coming over to me going, oh, you're Adam, aren't you? Yeah. Oh, I spoke to so-and-so. So that was that. Then I started following Nick Mitchell, who owned UP, the gyms in London. And back then, it was like, you know, those gyms were like the creme de la creme. It was like the Real Madrid of personal training, you know, for trainers that really love like body composition. I should specify, sorry, because we've all got what we consider results to be, but in the body composition space. And then they were opening up one of their first ever like junior positions. And I remember applying for it, and it was like, I want to say it was a 4 or 5 stage interview process. One of them being that you had to break down a common dieting protocol and break down the mechanism of action and this and this and this and conclusions and then site references. Well, I've never been to uni. So I had to get resourceful. Yeah. So under my bed, I'd had years of muscular development magazines. And there was always a section in that by like a scientist, like a PhD. Nice. So I basically just found like 6 of these magazines that all spoke about ketogenic dieting. And then I started Googling all these references and trying to make head or tail of it and YouTubing. And it took fucking days, actually. Put it together, went through it, and then eventually got the role in London. And then, started there as a junior trainer. Again, for people that don't know, you know, the back when at that point with UP, they would basically try and break you. So I was given my first, so I lived in Crawley, so it was an 1.5-hour commute. So I was given my first client at like 6:30 in the morning. So I'd have to be up at 4:30 on a 4:55 train into London to train my first client at like 6:30. Then they gave me my second client at 7:30 p.m. So I literally had like a 12, 13-hour gap between the two of them. So I had 2 choices. One was an 1.5 hours into London, train my client for an hour, 1.5 hours back, sit at home all day, 1.5 hours back in when everybody's leaving London at 5 o'clock, get on the opposite train, train my client at 7:30, or just sit in this underground dungeon all day. So I focused on that. Then the next thing that they did was then I had to go and package all of their supplements. So what would happen at this point is I would travel up in the morning, go and then at that point train my 2 or 3 morning clients, then get on a tube from UP City across to UP Mayfair, sit on the floor for 3 hours, packing supplements to be delivered, walk through London with a bright red bucket to a post office, then go back to the gym, give them the receipt, then go back on the tube to City and train my evening clients. And so I just did all that, sucked it up, and then I went from there to a normal trainer, and then eventually from a normal trainer into a senior trainer, helped with mentoring some of the newer coaches and so on. And then again, become one of the, at this point, you know, UP had expanded. I believe there was like, the point that I left, maybe 120 trainers in the business. And Akash and I were pretty much like 2 years in a row, the top 2 trainers in the business for results before and afters the volume that we had.
What do you think drove that? Like, what do you think? Because a lot of people, we're all in the results business. And as you've probably seen with our work at TMP, we almost overanalyze to the point where it's like, how can we ensure that everyone gets a result of some kind, but the best of the best? What would you attribute that? Because a lot of, like, you know me, I've never done the marketing thing. 2 years ago, you said you need to set up an Instagram account. I was like, shit, yeah, okay, all right, I'll do that. And I got asked on a marketing podcast recently. I went, all right, I'll jump on. And they said, what was the number one thing? For us, our biggest marketing tool was delivering results. That's the number one thing, just deliver results, and that will generate the business. And then the question will always come, how do you deliver results? So for your field, in that time, in that space, How did you deliver a result?
So I think the thing that got me into and obsessed with results was, number one, it was hard. When I would look at the most trainers, 80% of gym floor PTs, they don't get results. 80% of PTs are those renter friends where their clients, if you truly audited their clients 6 months after joining, they're about the same. So I just took that as like a challenge. What can I do to separate myself? Then, of course, when I put two and two together, that these trainers were able to, walk the gym floor and mingle, and I wasn't so good at that. It then obviously become critical for me if I wanted to make any money and actually have any clients. Because I couldn't leverage my personality, just to be frank. So I think that was the first bit. In terms of then like how to achieve them, it was just understanding that it went beyond, and I can only relate this to obviously, if we're talking like the PT side of things, that I was looking around the gym and it was like, we've all done the same courses. We've all got access to the same 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body weight. We've all got the same, however many calories, however you want to work out these formulas. We're all doing that. We all at a basic level know how to program somebody to get stronger. Sure, some of us are smarter than others and can periodize things, whatever. But for the most part, we should know how to drop a pound to a pound and a half to 2 pounds a week off of somebody for 10, 12 weeks, right? It's not fucking rocket science. So what was the missing piece? It's the coaching. It was like getting inside that client's head, holding them accountable, not being married to one tactic, and being able to sort of blend between things based on what that person needed. And just, having a skill set as a coach instead of just regurgitating the same shit to every client. And then, having those tough conversations with people. And one line that I would always give massive credit to Nick for, two things that really stood out for me in my time working there. Number one was wanting the result more than the client did. When you really and again, for somebody listening, it's easy just to hear that and go, yeah. When you really actually internalize that and you take it to heart,
it's huge.
Genuinely, really putting more homework in outside of that 1 hour on the gym floor than the client does themselves, and then beating yourself up when a client doesn't get a result, even when it's on them and not you. Because most trainers, the cliche is, my clients don't listen to me. Yeah, but why don't they listen to you?
It's your job to make them listen to you.
Reverse engineer it.
Fire them.
Or get rid of them. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was, every PT session you do should be a performance. And that client, when they leave the gym, should feel that they would not be able to get there anywhere else. And this was one that I had to sit on for a while, because when we think of every personal training session has to be a performance, especially for anybody familiar with UP, they were known back in the day for screaming, shouting, like beasting their clients, for the cameras, and that's just not my personality type. So I just had to figure out what was mine, and mine was like that small word in your ear, like, I'm gonna fuck you up if like it was like that small,
nice,
where that client would feel like they are the
very intimate,
only person. Yeah, exactly. A lot of the times, I would be sat down, crouched next to the client, or I would get myself to their level. And at the beginning, the guy that was running the gym, Eddie, I think he thought I was lazy, always looking for an excuse to chill or sit down, but it wasn't that. It was like, how do I put myself on their level so they truly understand me? Because I'm not going to scream, shout, big hand gestures, F them, like, that's just not me. So again, figuring out, and then that carries over to even in online coaching, where I talk to the students and I'm like, even if you're doing a loom check-in, like, fucking bring energy to it, and be intense. And everybody's got different, what they perceive intensity to be, but it should be when your client receives their check-in feedback that you are undistracted, you're prepared.
Your style,
whatever your style is, you need to figure out how do you bring that intensity so that whatever it is, the person on the receiving end of it knows that for however long that check-in is, for however long that Zoom call is, for however long that personal training session is, like, you are the only person in the world in that moment.
I just want to tap into the mental side very quick, because there's a lot of coaches that are shitting themselves over chat GPT, and they're shitting themselves about AI and, oh my God, like, it's going to do me out of a job. It won't. And here's why. You can have all the tools in the fucking world, but if the inherent human being does not want to pick up those tools, because there's no emotional skin in the game, it's fucking useless. Now, if we look at history and we look at the innovation of technology, shit's always going to change. If you think about the kitchen, think about how much stuff has been automated. Even a microwave is unbelievable. Even starting a fire on the cooker is unbelievable. Even creating a refrigerator out of snow to make sure you can still refrigerate shit. You know, like there is so much automation that happens every single day. We've got no idea. Even think about the phone. The phone has your camera, your emails, your messaging. Like, think about it. Before, I'd have to go and if I'm in the UK and I wanted to contact Adam in Dubai, I'd have to go to the post office and send a fucking letter. So a lot of people are like, oh my God, this is just another innovation, just like all the stuff we've ever automated. The difference is that tool's actually gonna make your life easier, but you'll never replace the mental part. You'll never, ever replace that because everybody's got the information already. Everybody's already got that. Your job as a coach is to inspire change, is to make movement happen. And I think that's a really underrated piece because you're not going to be replaced by a robot. There's already apps where you can go and get all the training plans and nutrition plans, but nobody sticks to them. Why? Because nobody understands the emotional and psychological reasoning why. So that's a really subtle point that I think is really understated in the coaching industry is go mental. Get inside their head and go, why do they want this?
Yeah, it's funny because this came up on, I did a webinar last night to the OT students about ChatGPT. What's funny is I can't remember whose it was, but there's been a couple of podcasts that I've done 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, where I was asked one of those questions of where do you think the industry is going? And I said AI. It's exactly what I said. And there's another coaching program out there, business coaching program, where they were teaching they had a name for it, which I won't go into, but they were basically teaching their students or their clients, sorry, so the PT's clients or the online coaches clients to like self-check-in and go through a process using logic and stuff in type form. And I remember hearing about screenshots being put into their group, which was like, I've got 33 clients in the business, but actually today on my check-in day, only 4 of them have checked in, never had this much free time. And I remember saying to people, this is fucking moronic. You're charging up front for 12 weeks of this thing. You've just had a client get to the end of their 12 weeks and go, well, I've just checked myself in for 7 weeks and got a congratulations message. You don't need to check in. Why am I going to carry on paying this person? Like you're not
coaching.
No. And this just plays into the hands of the whole being replaceable and AI stuff. It's that human interaction, that understanding the psychology, the mindset, the mentality, that real level of accountability. That is what, will keep you in the game long term. And then you just have to be open-minded rather than bury your head in the sand when you see something like ChatGPT come along. Don't bury your head in the sand, like embrace it, keep an eye on it. Try and leverage parts of it for content production and so on and start asking, how can this eventually be useful? Yeah.
But computers are never going to sort people's heads out.
Nope.
And the AI can get as clever as you like, but I do believe there's something about a human-to-human interaction. Because deep down, even if you don't, you still know, it's like, I guess this is a funny way of putting it. I've never really been into fake luxury goods ever. But once I got given a fake pair of Clito Reyes boxing gloves. Difference is I knew it was fake. You know what I mean? And I knew it was fake. And it's the same. You can use an AI all you like, but if you think it's not real, it's hard. Whereas when there's a human being on the other end of the phone, that's like, dude, you can fucking do this. And these are the things you need to think about. Or like you said, getting in their ear and just whispering something that they need to move forward. Sure, you can have all the AI in the world, but that's not fundamentally going to change coaching.
Exactly.
People still need the human part.
Yep. Leverage it, but don't rely on it.
Yeah. So then take us into, you're a lifeguard. Just to get onto the gym floor. Like, this is the longest play ever, right? This is a really, really long play. You haven't just come in and go, I'm going to do business coaching now, off I go. But there's years of experience in that.
Yeah, so it was obviously becoming a lifeguard to just get my foot in the door to get experience on the CV. 20 hours lifeguard, 20 hours gym floor. Then it was just basic gym instructing. Then it was gym instructing plus personal training, then full personal training in London. And then eventually that's when I realized, I remember having a conversation with one of my colleagues on the gym floor. And he said to me, so I was working from my laptop doing some programming. And he said to me, the quote was basically something along the lines of, I bet you'd love to just be sat in a big ass chair all of these PT sessions just doing it from your laptop? And I was like, yeah, I fucking would. And there was no real thing, no such thing as like online personal training back then, but there was contest prep in the bodybuilding world.
Okay.
But the only way to get access to the high level coaches was virtually.
Yeah.
It was just through email. It was very basic, just literally a written email once a week. But I thought, can I, take elements of that and bring it into kind of the Gen Pop stuff? So Akash, one of my colleagues on the gym floor, he was similar to me. More introverted than extroverted, wanted the freedom, from the whole laptop thing. So we got talking about it. My passion was always nutrition and supplementation. His was training. So they kind of complemented each other. And then we just thought, you know what? If we could just earn $3,000 a month, but from our laptops and work in a coffee shop, life would be good. So yeah, and unfortunately we weren't able to, at UP, we weren't able to build the business while there. So we had to cut ties, give up our client base and, start from scratch. And that was the start of RNT.
And think about that, like, at that time, as you described it, there wasn't inspiration. Because this is what I say, like, without shitting on coaching, it's a model that's been done for decades. Coaching's been done. You're not, like you said, putting man on the moon or even like building a new technology platform. When I used to sell software, some of the stuff that these people were doing was so complex, so crazy, so competitive, so much change, so fucking innovative and new. It's a different ballgame, but coaching's been done. But you was at a point where that type of coaching hadn't been done yet, and you really were a pioneer. Now, you can look at thousands of examples of people that have been online coaches and been successful and lived the life of their dreams and still got results and done all of those things. But back then, when we talk about those pioneering moments, without romanticizing it too much, like Steve Jobs changing the face of UI, because back computers used to be black screens with green lines of text, and he went, well, why don't I make it look beautiful? Like that, those little moments of innovation, you were right at the forefront of that.
Yeah, and there's a couple of bits that we did that were quite unique when we set it up as like, how can we make this thing different? One of the things that we did, I absolutely kicked myself for as a lesson in business, which is I sat there thinking, what's the biggest bottleneck to clients getting results with nutrition? And what I'd realized is that there were two ways back then primarily to coach a Gen Pop client through nutrition. One was a set meal plan, which in the short term was great. The client followed this. If you worked it out correctly, they're going to get a result. But it becomes restrictive, boring, and so on. On the other end of the spectrum, trainers were using MyFitnessPal. And they were following the whole like Lane Norton, IIFYM, if it fits your macros, flexible dieting, which is great in the long term. But in the short term, for a client that's not nutritionally educated, it was too much freedom, where they were just all over the place. So I remember looking at this spreadsheet of our meal plans and thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could build in, like, if we could build something in between the two? And I'm terrible on spreadsheets. So I went to a website called upwork.com and basically said to this guy, I want to give you like a foods list. I genuinely sat for about 6 hours on Tesco.com, and I copied the nutrition values to everything that I deemed, useful for most clients beginning a fat loss journey. And then I said to him, I want you to basically create like a mini MyFitnessPal database into this sheet, and for my clients to have like a protein, a carb, and a fat option, and pick between them, and then for these boxes to turn red if they go over and so on. And we started rolling it out. And it wasn't expensive. I paid maybe 50 quid, 100 quid for this spreadsheet guy. And then I showed it to Akash, and he was just like, dude, this is game changing. So we rolled out to our clients, and lo and behold, they were like, our online clients were beating the results we'd ever got from the gym floor. And they were all feeding back about this spreadsheet. We called it the hybrid nutrition tracker. So we put documents together on why it was used and so on. And the business lesson comes from when I left RNT, I agreed with Akash that I would not take the IP for that, and I would leave it with him. And then it turns out Callum from GraphFit went and then created like another version of it. And I basically, if I'd have like taken that myself, I could have sold it to all of the OTE students, made a fuck ton of money.
But was there any IP behind it? Was there any like actually we have patented or copyrighted?
No, that's the lesson in that. Like I didn't really I didn't appreciate
how valuable that was.
Yeah. Because then suddenly everybody, once we started using stories and stuff, then what happened was I glossed over it on a webinar. I never thought it was that interesting. And then on an OTE webinar, I glossed over how I taught nutrition. I shared my screen. I showed this, and suddenly everybody in the chat's like,
"That's genius!
What the fuck is this? Can you send me a copy? Can you send me a copy?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I can't. I've signed a contract with Akash that I'm not allowed to, send this out." And then, after that, I was getting emails about it. I was then getting tags on stories. Then I saw that, as I said, Callum had created a version of it that got sold to everybody. And then it was like a year or two later that I sat on it. I'm like, I didn't realize what that little idea, something that I just thought I just get to my clients quicker results, actually was fucking huge. And I could have made a lot more money on it. Nobody really knows, where, sorry, I just hit my chin on the mic for anybody that didn't see. And nobody really knows where that hybrid tracker came from. Because now loads of different companies are doing it, using it. Every online coach out there probably has a version. But genuinely, it was me sat on a train, actually, just thinking, how can I do this? And
I've got a really funny story to contrast that. What year do you think that was? Who's going to guess?
Probably 2016, 2017, something like that. Probably like, what's that, 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago?
I think at the same time, we were building something similar, but we spent fucking tens of thousands of pounds. And here's how. Remember that nutrition app that I built?
Yeah.
So we built an app called Make Weight. And we went big. We branded and copyrighted all the M and the W and the phrase make weight. Nobody can technically use the phrase make weight in the UK in relation to weight loss. That's all we did. We went really big. And Luke was my nutritionist when I was boxing. And I had exactly the same problems, which was it's impossible to match like how much I need to eat with all of these different ingredients. And he had built a spreadsheet of all of the foods. So you'd put in your height, your weight, your age, your body shape, how often you were training, and a lot of these were full-time athletes, so we made guesses. We go, right, we think you burn about this many calories when you're doing this much of running, low, high, medium. We did all of these different things. And then we spent a fortune getting someone to build an app for us. And actually, we could have just had a spreadsheet. So again, entrepreneurship, there's so many different ways to do the same thing. You like 50 to 100 quid, here's a spreadsheet, done. And guess what? It got the job done. We're trying to build a fucking app to do that.
Again, a story that I haven't really told much is Akash and I actually did similar. So before we launched RNT, we'd obviously like saved, because we knew it was planning, we were honoring out like a period at UP, so we were putting money aside. So most people don't know this, but we actually started RNT about 15 grand in debt, where we had said that we want to do this big different thing. We want to go into online coaching and be super unique. So we'd actually spoken to a company to build us an app, and they quoted somewhere like 80 to 100,000 pounds. There's going to be a lesson in a second. And we were like, no fucking chance. We can't do that. So we said, no, we left it. They then came back to us and said, listen, we need a meeting with you. We've got something really exciting we want to show you. Like, great. And they basically said, that app that you want built, we figured out a way where we'll be able to build it for about 14 to 15,000 pounds. We're going to basically buy pre-existing like architecture, they called it. Yeah. And then we're going to build what you want on it. So we were like, oh my God, great. So Akash and I again, emptied our savings account. We really had to, I mentioned the risk earlier with the mastermind. That was obviously once we'd rebuilt. But before we went into RNT, our money that we'd set aside as our like financial runway, we both had to put, I think it was like £7,000 each into having this app developed. And then I basically remember getting shown the final draft, and I just looked at this guy and was just like, what the fuck is this? It looks like I've tried coding it. I think I was like 7 days before a bodybuilding
I know those
show.
Moments, and you spent a fortune on it, right? And you're thinking, fucking hell, what have I done?
Yeah, and his answer was just like, well, what do you expect? You were told. So we actually ended up just walking away. Yeah. We just let them take our money. And we just walked away as a lesson. So the lesson here is like, if something sounds too good to be true, it is. Yeah. And then we went with that humble 50 to 100 pounds Upwork spreadsheet. So,
and how powerful is that?
So we did actually do the app thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody that wants to build online stuff makes the mistake with the app. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about doing an app,
don't do it.
Don't know. There's so many cheaper ways than
people
doing
have done it before you. Trainerize, True Coach, PT distinction. Just white label them for like however much per month.
So much easier. So run me through this. How do you actually get to RNT? You're at the point now where you've had an app, hasn't quite worked, or you've gone, right, you know what, because that's what we did. We had to rub our hands together and go, You win some, you lose some. We've chalked that up to experience. That for me was my uni degree in business. Everything, how not to do things. So you've done that and you go, right, I'm out. How did you then go and scale R&T? Talk me through that journey.
Yeah. It's going to sound really cliche and people probably roll their eyes, but it was just results. You know, we knew nothing about marketing, right? I've shown the OTE students the exact emails when Akash and I set R&T up of our financial predictions. And there's an email chain of Akash going and working on our forecast and me writing back going, is that 11 grand a year, lol? And he goes, yes. And I went, I better go get a part-time job in M&S or something. Like, we've got a real email chain of that. You know, our goal was to do 3K a month from a coffee shop. But we just started focusing on results. And I remember reading a quote by a guy called John Goodman that was, do a great job and tell everyone about it. And again, these are quotes that there'll be, you know, people watching this, 50% of people will just go, all right, yeah, of course. 50% of people, I hope, will listen to that and like internalize it. What does it mean? Like, do a good job, as in results, and then tell everyone about it. Social proof. And this is before the word social proof had really, like, you know, come around. And again, we were making the whole marketing thing up as we went along. But to me, I internalized that as like, as online coaches, we're gonna get more consistent, better results than any gym floor PT. And then we're just going to saturate our Instagram accounts with it. Instagram, Facebook, you know, we've started building an email list. We're just going to hammer it with just like results. And that was really what we did. And then one of the first things that, again, maybe I'm blowing my own trumpet too much, but I think we pioneered the whole general population client shoots. So we started doing, we were getting clients that become really serious about their training. And I was realizing that there was something very powerful about having a backwards countdown to a goal. And I knew this from obviously me competing and knowing that you're 8 weeks out, then you're 6 weeks out, then you're 7 weeks out, you know, and so on. There's something about that time sensitive deadline that holds you accountable versus just trying to lose body fat or gain muscle and having, you know, no real end goal. So I said to one of my clients, why don't we do a photo shoot? You said you want to be on the cover of Men's Health magazine one day. I know a guy called Ben. He can take some photos of you. See what happens. So he did it. Huge buzz out of it. We then set for him to do another one a year later. And I basically treated him like a bodybuilder. This is like a 43-year-old guy with kids, right? Basically we went through like a muscle growth phase afterwards, worked on his weak areas. Then we dieted down the next year and we got him slightly leaner, slightly bigger, treated like the bodybuilding process. And he loved it. So we had another client do it, then another client do it, and then we end up doing like group shoots where we would have them all on the same day. And that, I think, just put R&T on the map, you know. And now if you look at the OTE with all of the coaches that we do, now it's like it's a process. You become a good coach and
you've essentially set an industry standard.
Yeah, now everybody does client shoots. So again, maybe somebody else had also done it, I don't know. But I don't really know of any online coaches that were getting normal, you know, corporate clients to get, you know, bodybuilding levels of shredded, perhaps without the same muscle mass, and then get in front of a camera and doing a photo shoot. Wow.
And would you say that was the catalyst, results, and then actually talking about it? Because that's something you told me about.
Yeah.
You called me out. You said, Kieran, you don't do enough. I remember we was having lunch and you went, yeah, dude, you actually need to capture testimonials. And I was like, yeah, I know. And he's like, no, seriously, fucking do it. So we started doing it. And then all of a sudden I was like, Adam, I'm getting all these inquiries. You're like, yeah, it's one thing delivering. You've got to talk about delivering. So that seems so obvious now in hindsight. But back then, that was new territory. You'd found almost like a glitch in the matrix. It's like, hang on, this can really turbocharge inquiries.
Yeah, especially. And especially for me, so I predominantly seemed to attract female clients. And you can have a male and a female lose the same amount of body fat, but often, and this isn't fair, but it just is what it is, often it will look more impressive and visually different on the male just due to the amount of muscle mass that we carry compared to a female. You know, it sucks, but it is what it is. So having these females that I was working with bust ass, work really hard, crush it, get great results, but visually in their sort of before and after check-in photos where they just sort of stood there relaxed, it was like spot the difference. You're like, fuck, you know, she's dropped X amount of pounds, she's done so well. And You just can't really see it. Suddenly though, you get them to do a photo shoot where they have a bit of a tan on, they do their makeup, they're holding a weight, they twist at a certain angle. And that's what gave them that like night and day difference. So then it was just, you know, like putting fuel on the fire for marketing as well for females.
Wow. And you got to that point where, and we're going to touch on this on another episode of, on the next episode, we'll touch on leaving that business. And then this time between that and launching the OT. We'll go there next episode in a part 2. But as you look back on that, if you was going to distill it down to 3 key principles, and you might have already done it, you might have already done the first 2, but the 3 key principles that enabled you to go and do that back when no one else was doing it, you didn't have, here is a proven framework for you to build this up. What would you say you're looking back? There might be more than 3, I don't know. You go, here is this and that, and this is what I took away, and this is what built a lot of my mentoring philosophy and just what I know about business and coaching.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say number 1, obvious one, results. They do a good job, tell everyone about it. Like, you know, I just can't understate that enough. Like, just track every 10 clients that you work with, how many of those 10 actually get what they paid for. You'll be humbled.
Yeah.
So it's trying to, you know, extract, you know, get as close to 10 out of 10 as possible on that. So that'd be number 1. Number 2 is, what can you do to remove friction continuously and make your life easier for clients? That's how that hybrid nutrition tracker came up. Was this works, there's a gap in the middle that is what the 80% fall into. How do I bridge this? Which was the hybrid nutrition tracker. So it's, you know, thinking outside the box and not resting on your laurels, because as I said, online coaching was sort of done, but it was from like John Meadows, Shelby Starnes, these guys from the bodybuilding world, where it was just one email that looked ugly as hell. You know, it just didn't work in the Gen Pop sense. And then the third thing that I would say for me was probably the biggest shift, which was then embracing marketing and sales. Because I was that classic PT that was like, I don't care about the money. This is how bad I was. People will find this useful. This is how bad I was when it come to sales and taking money from people. Is when I was a PT, twice, 2 separate occasions, I trained a client and they thanked me and walked out the gym and never paid me, because I had never communicated to them beforehand the price.
Right.
I just spoke to them about, I'll train you on the gym floor for an hour. And then afterwards, I didn't have the balls to chase them down the corridor and be like, yo, dude, you know, that was £35 or whatever it was, you know? So that's how much of a, you know, I hated the idea of taking money from people. But I eventually hit that cliche of, you know, you're doing people a disservice and whatever. So eventually the third principle would be just understand that marketing and sales it becomes part of your job if you're owning your own business. And as long as you train people ethically and you turn down working with people that, you know, don't fit your values or you can't get them a result, you need to become proficient at it in order to be able to get people through the door. Otherwise, the coaches with the gift of the gab that aren't necessarily best results producing coaches will pick up the clients.
Mate, I've personally deeply enjoyed this podcast. It's been so much fun. Where can everyone find you?
Instagram's the best place, at Adam Hayley 1.
Amazing, dude. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for being such a good mate and a client. You know, it's been an absolute joy coaching up until now. We've just been having so much fun, and I'm really excited about the next chapter as to what's coming up for Adam. And in the follow-up episode in part 2, we'll go into a little bit more about the end-to-end process of the R&T days, of that grey area of, okay, well then I'm going to go into the OTE and what you're working on now. But yeah, just a huge thank you, mate. I appreciate you.
Look forward to round 2.
Yeah, here we go.